Well, hello all you wonderful people out there, and welcome back to the channel. Um, for this month's pro tip, we're going to talk about choosing the right firearm. So, you have, again, this is yet another video that's aimed more toward, say, the newer people in the hobby of firearms, or entering the defensive mindset, as I like to call it. So, you done made the determination that yes, I want to have a firearm to defend myself. Okay, well, there's lots of options out there. What do you want that gun for? And, uh, are we talking something that you keep in your vehicle? Something that you carry on your person? Something that's purely meant to defend the home? And once we've made that determination as far as what specifically we're looking for, then we can divulge into the other options as far as, well, if we're talking, say, a handgun a weapon you keep in your truck, purely for like when you're on the road, or worried about getting carjacked or whatnot. All right. If it's going to be in the truck, that means, well, I say truck. I drive. I've never owned a car, so if it's going to be in your vehicle, then ideally you're going to want something that's lower cost, something that is reliable, something that is relatively low maintenance. Now, most of the modern firearms on the market nowadays are going to be all of those things. Well, maybe not the low cost, but within reason, fairly low maintenance. Within reason, extremely reliable. And again, you get what you pay for 9 times out of 10. So there's that. But if we're talking like a dedicated vehicle gun that stays in your vehicle, you're more than likely going to want something that's small, compact, easily hidden. You're going to want something that you can essentially load and forget about until you need it. So easy to operate, user friendly, basically as point and click as you possibly can get. If possible, may or may not want a mechanical safety on the weapon. You certainly don't want any other fire controls, any more fire controls on the weapon than you need. So if it was, me, specifically a dedicated vehicle kept gun, I'd say a revolver. A little small J-frame, little snub nose, little Saturday night special type revolver. A 38 special will do wonders at close range. And if you're close enough that you're able to get to your vehicle, or you're in your vehicle, they're most likely going to be right up on you, so you don't need to be able to just reach out and touch. If we're talking about home defense, purely in the home, it's not going to go with you in the truck, you're not going to carry it, then me personally, depending on where you live, okay, if you live out in the country by yourself and there's no one immediately around you, I'd say get an AR. I'd say get an AR or a handgun. Either one of those is a perfectly fine option. An AR would allow you to, if needed, reach out and touch at the end of your driveway, much less at the end of the hallway. If you live by yourself in that scenario, over penetration is not going to be as big of a deal. If you live in town and you live by yourself in a house, not an apartment, I'd say get a handgun, because a rifle is probably going to be a little bit overkill. A semi-automatic handgun, a rifle is probably going to be a little bit overkill, and it can overpenetrate through multiple walls theoretically, and potentially have enough left in the tank to injure or kill someone out on the street in front. If you have a family, then I'd recommend, like I recommend using a pump action shotgun for a number of reasons. Number one, there's no other sound in the world that mimics a pump action shotgun. It is a very unique sound, and it's kind of like a rattlesnake. The first time you hear it, you know what it is. 9 times out of 10, that is going to scare off pretty much any home invader, unless they're absolutely intent on inflicting harm upon you, which at that point they're not, just a normal home invader. So, additionally, a 12 gauge with buckshot, while it can over penetrate through walls, it's not going to have near as much potentially lethal effect if it passes through the wall into, God forbid, your child's room, your bedroom where your spouse is still asleep, or hold up, protecting herself or the kids, or there's less opportunity for a fatal accidental over penetration and hitting or killing someone you don't intend to harm. Of course, with those considerations come the secondary considerations of it's 2:30 in the morning, the bump in the night that you feared has come. A handgun is always going to be your most flexible and versatile option, simply because it's small, it's light, and you can keep it right here by you, on you, when you're traversing hallways or clearing doors or coming around corners. It's not like a long arm, excuse me, I've got something in my eye, but it's not like a long arm that's all the way out here, so you have to take extra considerations as far as corners and hallways are concerned. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is how much are you willing to train? And if you are planning on buying a firearm, you should definitely train and practice so you can be proficient with that weapon. Not only to save your life potentially, but also to be less of a potential danger to other people. Because, you see people all the time on the highway and on the roads around your house and whatnot. They can't drive. They're terrible drivers. They're speeding. They're texting and driving, watching TikTok. We have those in the firearms world as well. People that don't train. They buy a gun, they load it, and they forget it. They don't train, which makes them more of a danger to themselves and society because they're not proficient with their weaponry. So when they do need to use it, that gun that they loaded and forgot about 2 years ago, well, the springs might be set in the magazine, so it fails to feed properly after the first couple shots. They're fumbling with a mechanical safety that they don't know how to use because they haven't shot the gun since they, got their license to carry or whatever. So, whatever you land on as far as a defensive weapon, practice with that weapon. In the very beginning, while you're still new, practice as much as you possibly can afford to. Ammunition is expensive. Guns are expensive. Pretty much everything is expensive these days. But practice as much as you possibly can so you can get proficient with your weapon. Now, you don't need to be dead-eyed Dick able to, shoot a gnat off a swishing burro's tail at 250 yards with your 9mm. But you do need to be good enough that you can pull that weapon and bring it to bear and use it effectively with minimal risk to any innocent bystanders, to include, your cohabitants of your dwelling, be it roommates or your wife and kids or husband and kids or what have you. So that is my advice for this month's pro tip is you've made the determination, you're going to buy a gun. What kind of gun are you going to get? What is the purpose of the gun? Sit down and seriously think about it. And when you've landed on, shotgun versus AR versus handgun, for either concealed carry versus vehicle only carry versus only, home defense, once you've run through those hoops and figured out what you need, what your actual needs are, the final question you need to ask yourself is you need to sit down and you need to have a serious look in the mirror and ask yourself, can I legitimately pull the trigger on another human being and potentially take a person's life? If the answer to that question is absolutely not, there's no way I could live with killing a person, even if that person intended on inflicting me harm, then that's the end of it. You really don't need to have a gun. Because if you own a weapon and you're not willing to train with it, and you're not willing to actually use the damn thing when the time comes, hopefully, God forbid it doesn't, but when the time comes and the burglar is staring you in the face, if you're not actually willing to pull the trigger and he calls your bluff, you potentially just gave that guy a weapon to kill you with. So, and victimize more people down the road. So, those are all things that you honestly need to consider. And probably in the next month's pro tip, we'll talk about, now that you've landed on what you want, how are you going to store it? So that'll be next month's pro tip. Thank y'all for watching. Thank you for the love and support.